What's up, everybody? Welcome to the show. How you doing today, Kristen? Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Say something.
Say something.
Say
I like the whack
something, I'm
whack cracking
giving up on
noises.
you. Huh?
Whack whack.
What is going on in your life?
Blah, 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 blah. Warming up exercises is going on in my life.
Okay, well, we're here.
We're
What do
here.
we... I really have to figure out this camera, because we were going to do that the other day, but we didn't.
Figure out the camera?
Yeah.
I thought this is the solution. Vertical
No, this sucks.
guitaring.
This is a cello. This is not a guitar stance.
Well, you're just gonna have to invent an entirely new style of guitar playing just for this show.
I don't know if I'm up to the task.
Hi, Gwen. Hi, Isis. Thanks for joining us. We are going to talk about a lot today. In fact, we're going to talk about everything. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, which is the movie that you still haven't seen, right?
No, I've seen it.
Oh, you have
I
seen
made
it?
the reference last time.
Oh, okay, I misremembered. I thought that you were referencing it, but you still hadn't seen it, and I was going to give you homework.
No, I've seen it. I liked it. Obviously, it's not like...
I mean, it's like relevant to me, but it's not like for me, you know?
Well, I mean, I would like to think that movies are for everyone, but
That's not true
it
at all.
might be slightly more relevant to my situation.
I mean, you know, I think some movies can be for everyone, but like at the end of the day, like I think that there was a certain demographic in mind when they made Top Gun.
Oh, you mean Top Gun wasn't for me?
I'm not saying it was explicitly not for you, but I don't think it was... I don't think you were in the writer's minds. You know what I mean?
Probably not. I saw it in 3D.
The new one?
No, the old one in 3D. So what you see is like this like weird paper cutout situation because they have to like rotoscope everyone into 3D. So it was like a puppet show of Top Gun.
That's insane.
Aw. I think you might enjoy it. Like it's definitely reviving an old classic. What is up, JRF? Thanks for joining us.
All right, that's enough of that. Kristen,
Nice
Kristen,
riffs.
what book we doing today?
We are doing Everything is Tuberculosis. Thanks for holding it up.
Wah, wah. All right. We will get into that in a little bit, but I did really
I
like...
totally did not stay up all night rushing it like I'm, rushing a homework assignment or anything like that.
What last night? What page did you start at, or percentage?
I
Maybe?
was like about a third of the way last night when I started, like around like 7 or 8 p.m. my time, and then like finished the rest of the book and went to bed by 11.
Yo, that's a lot of... Oh, it took 3 hours. That's it. I mean, I guess that's how long it took me to get through the bulk of the book. It's not that long.
Yeah, it's not that long, and it's really well written, so it's really easy to read. Which again, kudos to John Green.
Heck yeah. I really like this idea that everything is X. Isn't like, it's not just everything is tuberculosis, but everybody kind of has their own everything is X. If you're like really into something and you kind of see it in different parts of the world. Do you have something like that?
I think when you were asking me before the show started, I was like, well, like in some sects of SECTS sects of
Thank you for
Buddhism,
clarifying.
there was this idea of interdependence being the root of everything. So I think that's where the whole like, everything is one and one is everything sort of idea comes from. This is not true across all of Buddhism, but at least the more popularized parts. So that's what made me think of. I'm like, well, literally, that would be everything. There's also like, whether you believe that the cosmos is we are the cosmos. We are part of it, which I guess is a theme of the book, that we're not separate from the materials that make up the universe.
Yeah.
So in that sense, we are part of everything. My very serious answers.
I don't know if I buy that. I think that like I mean obviously everything is related in the sense that we have the pieces, but I feel like everything is connected often has like an undertone of there's an intention behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's fair to say?
What do you mean?
Like if somebody says everything is interconnected,
Mm-hmm.
it's implied that that is significant. Do you buy that?
I do believe everything is significant.
Okay. I don't.
Why?
Because I think that
That's why every little thing is significant when you say stuff to me. Do you see the connection here?
Yeah, no, I do see like actually, let me ask this a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think everything is equally significant?
I think I tune the band of which things are significant is much more narrow for me compared to you.
Okay, so that mean do you say that in the sense that there's like a floor of everything is at least this significant, or a ceiling that there's a max significance? Can you say more about that?
I think there is a much higher minimum threshold of significance, and also there is a more flat threshold of significance.
Got it. Okay. Well, I mean, that could
experience
be
is within the span of things that could possibly happen.
so that could be the root of all of our frustrations with each other, which we've been feeling recently.
I think so. I'm like, oh yeah, maybe this is it of all things.
Yeah. Maybe we get into that
While you explain that, I need to close the window. I forgot to do that.
Okay, good. Keep out that dirty draft. JRF, thanks for the feedback about how things go with with watching it. So over the weekend, Kristen and I had a big old heart to heart, because like basically like once a week we get into a situation where we're talking about something almost exclusively through text, which we've identified, where eventually we end up agreeing about what we were originally talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But
did you know that everyone, you're entering a couples therapy stream?
Yeah. Shout out. Everything is couples therapy.
Everything is couples therapy. We can talk about this in a second.
Yeah. No, like so. There's unproductive conflict and there's productive conflict, right? Like Kristen and I, when we disagree about stuff, it's never because we think the other person's stupid. It's because like we're both reasonable, competent people that like maybe disagree about ultimately what should be done. But so we realized this weekend that we have this pattern of we say something and then it like seems to diverge and then reconverge after, 15, 30, 60 minutes, whatever. And I came up with, I can't come up with a better mental model for it. I'm trying to, but it's a problem of altitudes in conversation. And so I used the framing of there's 10,000 foot conversations, there's 1,000 foot conversations, and there's ground level conversations. And so 10,000 foot is kind of like broad strokes, big picture. 1,000 foot is, between the boots on the ground person solving like a very technical thing. And it's like I view 1,000 foot as the domain of nuance that isn't bogged down by every detail. And so my interpretation of Christian and I's interaction, and this is relevant to everything, is that I tend to hang out, or at least start at 10,000 foot, and Kristen hangs out at like 1,000 foot or ground level. And there's not a value judgment in there. It's just where we like to start
Kat,
picking
you think
apart
there is
problems.
no value judgment?
There is no value judgment there. Like, actually, what's your thoughts on it?
I feel like I still hate the analogy. I do think there is truth in it, but I hate the analogy because of the societal implications of that analogy.
Well, this is good because I am not working with society. I'm working with Kristen. And so I want to
In the
figure out
chat.
what was that?
And the chat who is here to witness.
I mean, chat's just here. But so, Kristen, like, one, obviously, if, like, I want to use an analogy that you like more if we have one.
I haven't thought of a good one yet.
Yeah. And so in lieu of that,
I think what I see is that like I spent a lot of time, with this degree looking under a microscope, right? Like and looking at like really actually spending time looking at microscopic things.
Yes.
And what I see is almost like a fractal where really microscopic things start to behave like entire multicellular organisms again. So like to me, like the ground level or the microscopic view actually comes back and turns back around into a macroscopic view again.
Okay, can you say more about that?
Because it's like a little piece that is really representative of what the big piece is happening,
For sure.
So I feel like whenever there are these like micro tensions between us, like I see it as a refraction of a bigger issue.
Okay, can you say more about that?
So I think that's why like I tend to like really like notice little things that you say where I'm like, wait, what? Like that, and then like, what is the implication of that? What is the intention behind that? So then it kind of like spirals into blah blah blah. So I think like that's why like there is often miscommunication between us when I feel like the significance of little things is really high versus
and I would just ask you to ask. Of course,
right, which is what we have decided that whenever there is a sentence with the subject "it," we should clarify on both sides what does it refer to, because that often like starts the entire misunderstanding.
Yeah, at the risk of starting a debate, pronouns are the cause of a lot of our problems.
Yeah. Oh my God, that is so wrong out of context. Okay, so Jacob said there are two types of people: one who wants to see something as not like something else, and the other one wants to see something as like something else. This is so true. I think I'd like to see things as like, and you like to see things as not like. Is that true?
I don't understand what that is saying.
Oh, like I'm trying to find patterns, and you're trying to find outliers. This is obviously very broad strokes.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know enough about what you're referencing to agree or disagree. I think that
I mean in a general sense. I'm out of analogies at the moment.
Yeah.
But no, generally, I mean, like when you are like observing the world, like are you looking for repeated patterns of things happening, or are you looking for something new or unexpected that has happened?
I typically try to figure out what is most likely to happen in most situations, and then I take in data points as like adjusting that model. You know what I mean?
I see. Actually, maybe it's the other way around. I think maybe I'm actually looking for outliers oftentimes.
I mean,
of breaking the pattern of what is happening, or a weird strategy. I tend to bring up like, here's something weird that I've spotted that I haven't seen other people do. I think I get very drawn to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm probably likely to be like, oh, this is a thing that doesn't normally happen, so it's not really that important right now.
Yeah, whereas I think I tend to hone in on like, oh, this is a thing that doesn't normally happen. We better pay attention.
Got it.
Yeah.
What's better?
I feel like it's one of those things like the whole like night owls versus morning larks, like you're morning person versus night person. Like we as a tribe need everybody in different like waking times so that we're all not eaten by lions in the middle of the night or something. And I feel like it's the same thing. Like you need different types of pattern spotting people so that mosaically you cover all the bases of what's going to happen.
I don't think I agree with that.
What?
I think it's really easy to say, hey, we need everybody in equal amounts. But I don't actually think that's how that plays out. I think you can come up with scenarios.
We embrace the D word, diversity.
I'll say diversity. I'm not scared of fucking Republicans. diversity in terms of like thought and approach, tactics, experience strengthens teams. There are numerous studies about that. I would say pure diversity of every member of a team is a random selection of performance is not the same thing. You know what I mean? And so, like, if you have a fully random team, it's not going to perform as well as a team that has been curated for the task at hand while keeping in mind the principles of diversity of thought, improving effectiveness.
So you want to be at least complementary towards a task, right? Like not like super random for the sake of randomness, but
Yes.
like everyone is covering for each other's weaknesses, right?
Yeah, I mean, and I think it can't necessarily be so explicit outside the context of, like, let's say like an esport, right? Because like an esport with a team with different roles, you can identify things that people are weak at, right? You can identify, hey, I have better aim than you, so I need to be in this role. You have better like quick tactical thinking, so you should be this support player. Real life isn't really like that, at least not all the time. And so,
but like, let's just say you have like two co-founders for a startup or something. Like, doesn't it fall into the pattern of like one person's the idea guy and the other person is the operations guy?
No, I think
Really?
that is an idea guy like cope myth.
Oh.
You definitely do need people that can talk to other people. Because as
like someone has to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
Like, you can't have nobody talking to nobody.
But like, idea guys aren't useful if they don't understand the domain. And the people that understand the domain are steeped in it. And so I've found it to be much more useful and effective to take a hyper effective person within a domain. Sometimes that's an engineer, sometimes it's like a different person. And honestly just build their confidence in coming up with ideas and like teaching them how to frame ideas in a way that's useful as opposed to wanting to do the thing that they want to do. And so like taking a person who is hyper competent and bringing them closer to like the idea guy archetype ends up, I've found, to have to generate better ideas rather than just a pure idea person, because the pure idea person sometimes gets to be like
plus sales, right?
I think, like, it depends on the company, depends on the industry, depends on the funding cycle, whatever.
Sure.
JRF points out something about, we'll say, outlier people or idea people, that there's a lot of tangents in there before you finish talking about the thing that you want to talk about. And I feel that as a person who wants to hyper focus on a thing for a long time, that I get frustrated with that. But a bad idea guy is Michael Scott from The Office. You know what I mean? Like,
fundamentally, I feel like he. Well, okay. My mind jumped to Scott's Tots immediately, which has like
was a bad idea.
Apparently. Well, he made too bold of a promise that could not be easily fulfilled. I do feel bad.
That's called a bad idea, Kristen. Like,
do not for those who. Oh, I guess it's a spoiler. I guess it's an old enough show, but yeah.
If you haven't watched The Office, I don't care if I spoil it for you. If you haven't watched The Office, I don't care that I spoil it for you.
Oh, okay, yeah. Do not promise to pay for an entire high school class's college tuition before you are a millionaire or richer. Because it'll be very disappointing when they find out that you can't do that.
Like, it's basically being like, hey, dude, I think world peace is a pretty good idea. And then being like, I should get the credit for that. It's like, no, ideas need to be grounded in the practical realities of the situation that you're in. And yeah, but that's not, is that everything? Is that what we're trying to talk about?
Well, I think going back to the original like argument that you were voting against, whether society needs like a random smattering of every type of idea or like a persona out there, like I feel like some element of novel discovery requires like stochastic randomness situation going on. So therefore, like of course we can like equally value every single person regardless of their contributions to society. I think that's really utopic and too extreme.
Yeah.
But we should like have an environment where like, you know, there is space for weirdos of society, right? Because there's a chance that something new might come from there.
I mean, obviously this is also our 10,000, 1,000 ground level altitude conversation, because at a societal level, yeah, you definitely want like a high variance of types of people around, because somebody at the edge might come up with polio vaccine, right?
Yeah.
At the 1,000-foot level, where we got to like run society and run farms and logistics and supply chains, like I don't really care about the Scott's Tots idea guys.
Sure.
And then at the ground level, if your truck is stuck in the mud, you don't need an idea guy. You just need someone who has a winch. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. So they're like one single concept cannot possibly apply to all three levels of thinking.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, but I think also like as so after we had our disagreement chat, we immediately independently tried to copy and paste on Telegram chat into ChatGPT.
But why, Kristen?
But why? Yeah, I think I told you that I wanted an objective third party, but I don't think I finished my sentence, which was like, oh, I also wanted to understand at which point I miscommunicated and how can I do better, right? Like, at least I think that would be a very reasonable thing to do. Is like, you know, let me learn from AI how to say things better or something like that. But you beat me to the punch because I couldn't figure out how to export the chat.
Yeah, you just gotta drag the
you didn't
down.
drag it. I was like, let me download this separate Mac OS app for exporting, which took 24 hours, by the way.
That is you gotta hack your way to the things that you want. I just wanted to figure out if I said the thing I intended to say, and the answer was no, I didn't. Fun little fact is I'm too impatient with Kristen.
Well, no, I think it was pointing out something that, well, ironically, because of the way I think and operate, I couldn't tell you at the time because it's talking about like almost like type 1 and type 2 thinking, like the whole fast and slow thing, right? And I feel like I was subconsciously feeling pressured to like come up with points right away, which you were not pressuring me to do. But then, like, because I view that as my weakness, I felt like very frustrated, and that's where things went awry. So that was also really important for me to learn back from ChatGPT. That's like, oh, right. Like, I was actually feeling really rushed. Yeah. But I couldn't have told you that because I didn't know I was feeling rushed. I was already mad.
Yeah, and I don't think that I don't know, would you characterize my tone as clinical? Because that's the word I've been using, but I haven't gotten feedback from you.
No, I actually didn't mind those parts. I think that's also really interesting because I think ChatGPT was like critiquing you for being too clinical and cold, whereas I wasn't actually bothered by that part. So I think like that's where ChatGPT doesn't actually know the person enough to make the choices.
Yeah,
at least laid it out in like more optionality than we would have come up with just between ourselves.
It's also weighted by what we say to each other. And so as we tried to explain ourselves, I think that made ChatGPT think that we it read more into that because we had seeded it with the hint of, hey, I'm attempting to do this. So they read it through that. It read it through that framing.
Right. Which I think is helpful because I don't think it could have guessed. So we have to tell it something.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know.
Right.
I maybe I'll try to have a conversation, or I might run some tests where I'm like a writing exercise. Right. And I'll just attempt to.
I think we should build this app because I've been trying to I know.
Right.
Because I have friends who get into couples arguments. So I have been trying to look for a good LLM couples therapy app, and it doesn't actually exist.
I mean, I don't see how we could build it better than just a wrapper on an API.
You'll be surprised. I also thought why hasn't someone built this? It's so obvious, but it for some reason doesn't actually exist if you search for it. There's only two or three of these Y Combinator sponsored apps, and they have stock images, and it doesn't seem like there's actually a functional thing behind it.
Just show me some Excalibur sketches, and we'll talk.
Okay. But I mean, it's just for dog food, right? I also want to improve my communication skills, as you can see. So What's been up? When you were asking me that, I was like, what's been up? It's me watching myself on video. Like,
Yeah,
and like
I just
start
don't.
evaluating everything I say online now, as part of our practice.
Yeah,
I think there's also something here where if we can take like video footage of ourselves and turn it into an actual good speaking coach, I would like that, please.
I mean, I think that
Oh my gosh,
that's a
Sharad,
completely
so
different
thanks
thing.
for your comments. Thanks
What's
for joining
up?
LinkedIn.
Shout out
Sharad
LinkedIn.
is
Appreciate your
my
comment.
high school friend.
Let's go. I'm trying to avoid side quests right now, Kristen.
I know. I just introduced like 5 million side quests, and
like
it's like
we
this digression.
everything is a side quest for us right now. We have things like we just went through a full cycle of
I know.
should we do this? No, it's not the thing, and we're at the part of the process of building stuff where it's hard. And so it's always fun to talk side quests, but I'm gonna be like, hey, this is what we just said 3 days ago.
I know. Isis, I will never finish Reframe Science.
You can build it.
Go to yet another side quest, and I'm already behind on that.
Kristen, before we get into this book, I did want to drop. I realized as I was reflecting on it that my everything is X is everything is Harvard or everything is Ivy League.
Ew.
I know. This isn't a I think this is how it should be, but this is I grew up outside of this bubble of like, golden path, golden passport like privilege. I got to it after the army. And once I got there, I learned all of the little dog whistles that people use to like communicate to other privileged, wealthy people that they're like wealthy without being rude in public conversation. And now whenever I hear a company announcement or I see something in the news or I like hear something where I'm like, ooh, that smells like McKinsey speak in like a public statement, I'm like, okay, let me do some digging. And more often than not, I find the little LinkedIn of VP of whatever, and it's
But doesn't it come back down to what Jacob was saying, to everything as relationships? Like those, like it's like rich people beget rich people because they are friends with each other, and Ivy League is just an offshoot of that.
I think that is minimizing what is actually happening. But so, like, as I dive in, everything does seem to be a Harvard or Stanford or Penn or these like Ivy League places.
Yeah.
And it's not just a function of, oh, they know the person there. It's institutionally the recruiting processes for all these companies feed from these places. And like, that's not as simple as like, oh, I know the person there, I'm going to call there. It's there is a yearly schedule of making sure that this thing continues to happen. And as a result, the advantage when you're like 21, 22 turns into a big advantage at 25, 26, turns into a huge advantage at 35, at 40, at whatever, which is fascinating to me. Oh, your LinkedIn buddy has a question.
Well,
I don't know, Kristen. Did we choose this?
Yeah, Cameron put on his shirt, and I was like, "Oh man, I want to be matchy today." So
I'm an influencer, y'all.
Yes, he is an influencer. Though this is my only floor shirt, and now I want to buy more. I forgot about this shirt.
What kind are you gonna buy?
I'll probably buy this brand again. It's really neat. It actually comes with a bunch of accessories. Sorry, I'm gonna go grab the accessories as a digression.
All right, chat. Well, Kristen's gone. You can say whatever you want. You can be mean. You can be nice. Just be honest.
My room's really small, so I'm already back.
Oh, she's back. Don't type. Stop whatever you're typing.
Yeah, like it comes with a koozie for your beverages.
Okay.
And it fits into this like back pocket, like exactly fitting in here.
Yeah.
A bottle opener, so you can be convenient and helpful to everybody. We're not sponsored by this brand that's called a California Cowboy, and it also comes with conversation cards, like.
Kristen.
Of like slightly douchey things, actually. Like trust me, you can dance. Stop texting.
Kristen, this is a really weird way to tell me you joined a frat.
I know, this is totally my shirt. I love it.
I am only going to talk to you if you use those cards as conversation starters for the next minute.
Oh, okay. Well, let's pick a great one. Let's see here. Oh, I like this one. Cut the shit.
Okay.
I feel like a
About
lot of
what?
these are like nagging, like they're kind of like Neil Strauss the game cards.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so terrible.
Oh, Big V over LinkedIn, the new Disney Snow White. I hear it's bad. I don't know though.
I watched an extremely long YouTuber video about this whole topic, so I regret to tell you that I'm way too informed for a movie I would never watch.
Okay. I mean, I'm probably gonna watch it now because I like being part of like the Room, Tommy Wiseau bad movie experience.
Okay, well, can I spoil it a little bit for you?
Yeah, I know the story.
No, you do not. This is not the same Snow White story.
Yeah.
So the original Snow White is like, Mirror, who's the fairest of them all, right? They have redefined the meaning of
Wait,
fair.
sorry, I missed that full sentence.
So, like, the evil queen goes to the mirror and goes like, mirror, mirror, like, who's the fairest of them all? Like,
Yeah.
it used to mean like, who's the hottest of them all, right? They redefined the meaning of fairest to mean justice and equity. And this is a movie in which Snow White is trying to reestablish some sort of utopia where everyone shares what they grow and what they do, like, produce equally.
That's pretty cringe. I'm not gonna lie.
So it has very little to do with the original movie. And also the prince is more like a Robin Hood-like character, apparently, who wants to, fight against the evil queen in a rebellion.
Man.
So it is. I'm not sure if you really want to watch it. Let me send you the YouTuber digression about it. It's
right.
She's really entertaining. I feel like I learned a lot from the way she talks.
Good.
Yeah.
Kristen, it's time to answer the question. Is everything tuberculosis? The floor is yours.
So that is something that he addresses in the book. Deep inside this book, although the title is Everything is Tuberculosis, he actually has a whole disclaimer about how you cannot make this claim. Like that, you cannot make a single-handed claim where you say one single thing causes everything, because everything is everything. So,
Do you agree?
So, which I think is super nice, because I think he didn't need to. A lot of these pop science books don't disclaim against themselves, and he did do that. However, it's in the middle of the book, and also if you watch his like TikTok shorts and all of that content he's produced to advertise the book, it kind of contradicts itself, because of course to make the hook you have to make it sound like everything is tuberculosis. So
I'm going to disagree with you and John Green. I do think everything's tuberculosis.
oh yeah, tell me more. Oh, and we should like talk about our backgrounds as explained in the title. So I have a neuroscience PhD. I used to work in the biotech and pharma industry that he talks about in this book. And I am also a certified chaplain, which is something that John Green is also.
Yeah, which was a fun connection that I didn't know. I was sick once. That's my qualification to talk about tuberculosis.
Oh, yeah?
All right, so what makes me think that everything is tuberculosis is much more in the cultural lens. If you take it literally, of course it's wrong. Duh. That's not fun. That's not why we're on the internet. If we want literal stuff, just go read a book or something. That's what I did. But no, so a fascinating piece of this book is when he goes into the background really of the 1800s onward. One thing that I didn't realize is most people throughout history existed before 1800. Like, obviously, when you think about it, that makes sense. But if you look at like the timeline of quantity of human beings and that existed, et cetera, most people across most time didn't even have a fraction of modern medicine, right? Like he uses a very good narrative building device of you take a normal doctor's office and you basically subtract everything that wasn't around before, like what, 1815 or whatever. He picked a year
that
around
part was
then.
great.
And, the stethoscope didn't exist. The little hammer that hits your knee didn't exist. Like all of these things that we use basically as the baseline to figure out medical treatment, like your arm pressure cuff. It just didn't exist. And they didn't have a concept of how to use that info to check if you were healthy or not. And so medicine before then was basically just like, you're probably sick, maybe bleed about it.
Right. And that's what, give me more context for the four humors. Because I've heard of it before, right? Before they thought that, lymph, blood, black bile, yellow bile was what you were made of. So Severance took that idea and turned it into the four humors, frolic, woe, etc. That makes sense if that's all you can observe.
Yeah. So different cultures had different versions of this. But I think like the Western medicine version of it was, as you pointed out, bile, phlegm, blood, and something else like that. And it was just like this idea that you had 4 different kind of liquids in your body, and them being out of balance was why you were sick. It's not entirely wrong in the concept of, hey, your body being out of homeostasis makes you sick in some way, but like the practical, hey, cut your arm open or let leeches suck your blood to fix it is just like obviously super wrong.
Yeah.
And so tuberculosis was a disease that kind of took over humanity because it was an outlier disease in the sense that it didn't happen that fast for the most part. And so you took a long time to die from it. And so more people experienced tuberculosis for longer. Which is really interesting because culturally that means, as far as a disease goes, it's a disease that hurts you over time, so you can sit and reflect within this disease. And if you're like an artist type or a writer type, you can write about it and other people can see you experiencing this thing. And so by virtue of the physical properties of this disease, it entered the cultural consciousness in a way that a lot of other illness like doesn't, because a lot of other illness that's like severe just kills you. And so you can't really write about it, but other people can write about you dying, but that's like not the same thing as the person that's sick is communicating their story. And so
yeah. And I thought it was really interesting how they thought that people with TB, well, they romanticized it and said that, well, it sucks that you have TB, but you are a great artist and creative. Which, in a practical way made sense because it's sort of like having an illness that you know is going to kill you much sooner, right? So you better get all your creative stuff out of the way now while you're still alive. So it gives you a sense of urgency to create, which I thought made a lot of sense.
Okay. We didn't do our opening statements. Was that your opening statement? Go for it.
Okay. Well, I highly recommend this book. I know this is the ending.
Yeah, spoiler alert again, Kristen.
So, for to me, I would recommend this book as for anyone who wants to read like something that's science related, because it takes you from the cultural aspects all the way to the systemic aspects of the pharmaceutical companies and what we can do to address all of that, while also taking it through a one-person narrative arc, right? Because in the story he's talking through his friend Henry. Yes, who suffers from tuberculosis, and throughout the book you're gonna find out like, is he going to make it or not? So I feel like the ability to weave like both factual things and a story narrative arc and getting you to care about someone is like really a testament to the fact that he's like a fantastic fiction author. Because it's really hard to find like nonfiction that's written in a way that's as driven as a fiction book.
Yeah, I mean, to make that like super concrete, he explicitly uses the narrative device of this person who is sick, that you are immediately sympathetic with. It raises the question of, is this person going to die or not? And that is the thing that carries you through the entire narrative arc of the book. While he talks about the history of tuberculosis, he uses this patient's journey as a way to anchor the evolution of the process of like identifying, treating, and ultimately like deciding how to leverage treatments for sick TB patients. So it is very, in terms of the craft of writing, it is kind of a masterclass in how you would ground a nonfiction, potentially like kind of dry book in exciting narrative.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, what is your personal relationship to tuberculosis, if any?
I think I wrote report on it in like 6th grade.
Okay. Can I show you something? There's a reason why I'm wearing a short sleeve shirt. Like, I'm gonna show you my scar from BCG.
I don't know what that is. What is that? Is that like a vaccine?
Yes. So in the book, he does talk about this being a vaccine that's often given to kids in like developing countries. So that's one way I can tell right away that someone didn't grow up in the U.S. is if they have the same scar.
Gotcha.
Because like when you get this vaccine, it hurts like a mother, like it's really painful, by the way. I remember I couldn't lift my arm for the entire day.
Oof.
But it causes a scar. And like for us, it's a very formative thing that all kids remember. It's like, oh yeah, when they will compare scar size and be like, oh, it's like sucks that yours is humongous, that kind of thing. But it really impacted me like throughout, like just even trying to come to the US because like in order to like get a student visa, you need to prove or like to enter or like once you're in the country, then they will ask you before you can enroll and be in school, like, do you have like, reactivity to TB? And I was really concerned because like this actually makes me reactive to the skin test. So then it gets into like a lot of bureaucratic issues of like proving that I don't have TB.
That sucks.
Yeah, so I think it's something that like people who are not in the US end up thinking a lot more about just because of all these like hurdles you have to go through to prove that you are clean enough to enter the country.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a ton of American privilege around vaccines and we'll say other aspects of what it means to be a person moving around the U.S. Without really scrutiny. I was born in Germany and then grew up in the U.S., and so I don't have that scar. My closest parallel is in the Army. I got all my vaccines twice because they lost my records, and so I did it all once.
I was trying to look up whether they required this particular vaccine for the Army, and I saw it didn't. But you guys had to take a lot of other stuff. So
yeah, I had to get I had to get the anthrax vaccine, and that was pretty painful.
Yeah.
I think it was like 2 shots or something, but mine turned into 4. Okay, V, we'll get to those questions. Those are good questions. All right, Kristen, anything else on the opener of this book?
I have a lot of much more specific questions I want to dive into.
All right, let me get into what I find to be a really compelling theme of this book, and this is the lens that I viewed it through. It's a book about the correlation or like it's a book about the interconnection between agency and luck, both on a local level and a global level. And so it's a story of people that had things happen to them, which is like getting tuberculosis in a world where there was no cure or anything like that. And then people in that world deciding that they were going to do something about it. A lot of them not even, career medical folks. There was like the era of people that you could just like do medical experiments in your basement. You can still kind of do that, but it's like, it's not, it's a touchy subject. But you connect it with people that now live in a world where they have the poor fortune to be born into a place where they can still get this disease, which is like eminently curable if the right logistical supply chain and benevolence happens. And there's people with varying levels of agency like that they choose to have and that they are privileged to have, deciding how to use it across these various contexts. And I think that's really interesting because medical stuff is a microcosm of life. You know what I mean? We like medical stuff because it inherently comes with stakes. And a lot of things in our life don't really come with stakes beyond, basic, is this person going to be upset with me? But if you deal with a life or death situation, it's a life or death situation. And there's inherently more drama in that. And so we care about it more. And obviously it could affect us actually. And so
right.
As far as a book discussion goes, there's a lot of things that are going right for this book to be an interesting and compelling and useful piece of literature.
Yeah, I think especially as we are dealing with, large bodies that are perhaps changing the way market dynamics work. The whole question, right, comes down to, since healthcare is life or death, should the rules of the market apply here, right? Because a lot of these inequalities and market dynamics are happening because it's awkward, right? Food is a basic necessity that is actually somewhat lobbied and supported in some ways and subsidized. But then for medicine, it is such an important need for most of us that if you leave it to pure market dynamics and supply and demand, we're going to end up in a place of inequality oftentimes, because then the development of a competitor product is much harder when it is a unique life-saving drug.
I mean, I went to Harvard Business School. I'll tell you straight up, it is talked about how it is hard to make a business for poor people because they have less money, and it makes more sense to charge rich people more money in a lot of drug cases. Does the math follow that? Sometimes, not always. Sometimes there's communities with needs that the quantity of people that pay for it, it ends up being a lucrative thing. But the discussion, are poor people worth making medicine for because they can't pay you enough, happens explicitly, which the existence of that conversation would freak a lot of people out.
Yeah. So it's so interesting you phrase it that way, because it reminds me of the whole creator freemium model that the Green brothers actually use, right?
Yeah.
They have put a lot of free content, and then the whole idea of the model, which they have explicitly said before, is people with money needs, if they can give more, then it helps everyone else get a share of the content and support the whole thing. And I feel like it's the same here. Oftentimes in the because of the way the current pharmaceutical companies are structured, the U.S. is to some extent subsidizing a lot of innovation that is trickled
With
down
medical
into
stuff.
developing countries.
Sorry. Innovation in what?
In drug development.
Okay.
Because a lot of the research is done in US-based companies right now, right? And also because, frankly, in the US, we pay a lot more for the same drug. So very similar to textbooks, actually, in the US, we pay a lot more for textbooks, and there's international editions of textbooks that cost a lot less, right? So this differential is oftentimes what's theoretically funding a lot of research. Of course, this then gets into the weeds of transparency and how much more do you need to charge in order to fund research? And the John Green argument is they did end up dropping the price and things are still okay, and therefore they were probably profiteering a little too much.
To be clear, they dropped the price because people lobbied and put public pressure on them to drop the price.
Yes.
They didn't just
Because of the
decide to.
awareness. Yeah, exactly. They did it because of PR pressure, which I think is a perfectly legit market dynamics issue,
Yeah.
right? That's a good lever.
Yeah, are you sure it's not terrorism?
Well, that's a very dicey topic now because we have somehow redefined what that means. So I would not touch that.
I thought if I don't like it, it's terrorism. Anyway, Kristen, so you were a researcher during your PhD. What are your thoughts on U.S. subsidizing research for the rest of the world?
Well, that seems to be changing since we're now deciding to not really fund research. So,
but assume that we still do.
Yeah. I think that there was a time, perhaps before this year, where America is a little bit like the police force and of the entire world to some extent through military might. And I feel like in a way we were also trying to lead in innovation in order, there's a altruistic reason and a practical reason, right? If you are the first to invent something, you get to make the most money from it. So they weren't doing it just to help the rest of the world. Yeah. But that fundamentally is what happens. So I benefited from that, right? My research was funded by NIH grants. So I'm very thankful for that opportunity. I just think that if governments understand how much money you can actually make through research, then they would be much more willing to fund that. So I think it's understanding that a lot of times it's a very asymmetrical bet to do research because most things just don't pan out. But when you do, it does. It's almost like venture capital in some way. And I think the ability to continue to fund that is really important.
So do you have an opinion on whether we should subsidize the rest of the world?
I think we should, but for selfish reasons. So that's something that you and I were juggling, right? Like sometimes some of these like more like wishing other people would do good arguments are really complicated or like don't like actually execute well
Or
because
pie in the sky, yeah.
yeah, exactly. It's like, we hope people do things out of the goodness of their own heart, right? Especially as a chaplain. But in reality, we do things for selfish reasons. And I think this is where like actually Buddhism is oftentimes misunderstood to be altruistic, but
Mm.
like the Buddha said, you should do good because it makes you feel good. It's actually a fundamental selfish argument on purpose because it's not pie in the sky. It's like, the idea is like you shouldn't do things out of like moral obligations in that way, but more of like a selfish benefit. So I think we should because like innovation is actually very profitable. So therefore, like, it seems like we're subsidizing, but that's a side effect of us leading in being able to price the product.
Yeah, I mean, I buy that. I think that there are a lot of there's a lot of people that come to discussions like this without a coherent sense of their own worldview, and so they react to the thing right in front of them without confronting all of the secondary and third order, fourth order, fifth order things that also could benefit them. And so while I would like to believe that people that think of themselves as fundamentally good would in general be in line with, hey, let's stop 1.5 million people from dying every year unnecessarily by giving like tuberculosis meds. I understand that unless you say that directly to somebody's face, they're basically going to try and worm their way out of not agreeing with that. And so I generally agree that the self-interested arguments are the most useful and the most convincing to people that don't want to accept that they are okay with people dying. What?
So,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I think a lot of this book also mentions like other characters besides Henry, like a lot of like doctors and healthcare providers who and other social workers as well who want to help the whole situation, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like this gets into the idea of like meaningful work because it's like what is more meaningful than actually saving lives, right? So what do you consider as meaningful work?
So personally, I'm discovering my definition of meaningful work. I've had bits and pieces of it throughout my life. Like in high school, I worked at a Steak and Shake as a waiter. I found that to be some parts meaningful in the sense that I learned a lot about the world that I didn't know beforehand by waiting on the after church Sunday lunch crowd, right? I waited on a bunch of people that were just coming from their weekly dose of Christian love and weren't really emulating that in their day-to-day life. Additionally, I made a good, $150, $200, which as like a, 16, 17-year-old, that filled up my car for a month, And so they're like, my definition of meaningful with that, it was pretty fulfilled. As I got older, I spent time in the military. I got a deep sense of, I'm doing a good thing because that's kind of what's inculcated in you as you do that. As I got deeper into it, I had more complex feelings about that. And I still generally agree with the broad strokes and disagree with, I would say, a lot of the specifics of it.
Speaking of military, there was one part that reminded me of you. I think it's the quote from World War One, the
Yeah.
Dulce Decorum Est Patramori. I'm sure I'm butchering the whole quote.
Yeah, no, I have no idea what you're saying.
It's something to the tune of like there is nothing more glorious than like dying for your country.
Yeah, I mean,
It's a World War One poem by Horace. Yeah, the
Yeah.
Dulce Decorum Est Pro Patria Mori.
I mean,
It is ennobled to die for one's homeland.
I mean, if you just go back to, Spartan times before that, it is extremely useful and convenient for the state to convince young men that dying patriotically is a good thing.
Were you? I hope it's okay for me to ask. Like, was that was something that in the army you were taught? Was it implied?
I would say like kind of yes, asterisk. It's taught with but with the energy of, you ever watch Patton, the movie, the Patton movie?
No.
There's a big famous scene where he gives a speech for, like, in front of troops, ostensibly before, I believe, D-Day. And in the speech, he says, "There's nothing patriotic about dying for your country. Your job is to make the other asshole die for his country." And so there's like an
Wow.
energy of no, like in in conflict where most people die, you kind of have to have that cope of, hey, you have fulfilled your duty. You're gonna go, get your virgins in heaven. You're gonna like do this martyrdom thing, which is like a theme through a lot of different cultures, not just Islam. And so like the martyrdom aspect of it isn't really explicitly pushed because the U.S. doesn't want you to die. I mean, based on what's happening to the VA, you could argue that maybe it's more convenient for veterans to die than to get taken care of. But the core of it is dying comes with the territory, not that it's the point. And so you see in military like literature, art, poetry, this shift over the past like really 1,000 years away from focusing on the glory of a death in battle to something a little bit more nuanced and modern, where it's like it comes with the job and it's like a noble part of the job, but it's not necessarily like the point or the default. I don't know if that answers your question.
Um. So, like, was it something that like they explicitly like drill into you in boot camp? And I remember you were talking about how in boot camp they break you down and then like build you back up, right? So, was there a point where they talk about this kind of thing and then they assume, okay, you've got that part, and we're gonna move on to the skills and all of that, or
It's
like was it like just like background culture kind of thing?
there.
What is it
There's
like? No one
not
talks
like a
about it.
there's not like a sweet little info session where you get everybody in auditorium and be like, hey, just so you know, you
Mm-hmm.
might die.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, honestly, that's like liberal fantasy shit. The like I'll just that's it's more about redefining your baseline stakes for your day-to-day decisions. It's a when
I
you
think maybe that's why you have such a great 10,000 foot point of view,
yeah,
because
I
you've had to separate it all.
yeah, like the modern men in general compartmentalize by default. Part of it is societally, you're not allowed to feel emotions in most situations. You're allowed to feel anger,
Mm-hmm.
and you're allowed to be neutral. And
Mm-hmm.
generally, that's what you're allowed to do in public situations. And so there's like a baseline level of that. But when you get into military pipelines, if you do something like you don't pack your bag correctly,
Mm-hmm.
the corrective process is, hey, you didn't bring the ammunition you were supposed to bring.
Mm-hmm.
You run out of bullets halfway through this fight and you kill everybody on your team.
Yeah, so you mind the details to
Yeah.
a extreme degree also.
Yeah. And so it's like this, it is a sense of the decisions that you make, even if they're micro,
Mm-hmm.
can turn into something that matters at a critical moment. And so it's like an omnipresent sense of, hey, if you're not doing the thing that's good for the good of the mission or for the good of the team, you are explicitly potentially the reason that other people die. It's less about like your death doesn't matter, but other people's deaths matter a lot. And that's like the basis of, like brotherhood or connection in a lot of military and a lot of team contexts in general, just like with different stakes. But it's like less about the die for your country that's glorious and more about you are in a profession of bringing like legitimate violence to these places, and what comes with that is the stakes and responsibility of thinking about death.
I like the whole like brotherhood idea, or or like philosophy, way of being.
Say more.
Like, because that makes it much more like personal and human, right? I'm assuming that a lot of your like brotherhood is based on the fact that you're trying to help each other not die and protect each other, and then that seems more of a practical like benefit to the whole team as well.
Yeah, I mean, like there's people that are like, I'll die for the U.S., but most people are like dying for their team, and that like if there's good aspects of it and there's bad aspects of it, right?
What are the bad aspects of it?
Well, I mean, like the basic one is you end up having like weird sets of allegiances. it's very easy to manipulate people when they think from these hyper-local contexts. And so,
Oh.
like, what you can have is like a leadership team that knows you feel some type of way about like the people around you. And so they'll
Mm-hmm.
frame something that like there's some scandals about this, but there's like they'll frame something as, hey, you have to do this war crime like thing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't, your buddies will get in trouble or go to jail or whatever.
Oh, okay.
And so that's like how a lot of war crime type things get covered up
Mm-hmm.
because you've like created this sense of you've created a sense of like brotherhood without ethics attached to it, or like an ethical structure attached to it.
Wow.
Yeah,
Well, thanks for sharing that. I never thought about that possibility.
Yeah, there's the field of convincing young men to die for rich politician causes is nuanced and is a chain that has lasted thousands of years.
Mm-hmm.
Not that there aren't like women in the service, but it is overwhelmingly young and also overwhelmingly white men in combat arms.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I don't. I for some reason thought it was like because of the way they recruit from different classes, it wasn't tilted that way.
So the overall military is we'll say like weighted across like a bunch of different like minorities, mostly poor minorities. Specifically combat arms. There is a strong tradition in like Appalachia and other rural white areas of the country of going into military service, specifically like infantry type roles. They're not the only people there, but by and large, the combat arms units are like very white and very poor. And it's like a cultural thing. And also kind of why neo-Nazism coming up through the ranks of those parts of the military is a problem and a growing problem.
Wow. We have entered Godwin's law.
Yeah, we got back there.
Yeah.
I had a question for you. Like, so we've been on the internet for a while. There's a segment of the internet that had a moment.
Terminally, yeah.
What was that?
A little terminally online.
Yeah, terminally online. There's a segment of the internet that had a moment for a little while. They've kind of fallen out of the limelight with all the other crap that's going on. But you remember the effective altruists?
Yes. How can I forget?
I'm confused at why they didn't just all cure TB, because that feels like the easiest slam dunk. Hey, if we're going to pretend that we're optimizing for making like the most human value out of it.
I mean, it's the folly of thinking one is not susceptible to narrative, right? And that narrative was overwhelmingly malaria.
Okay, I don't know anything about this. Can you bring me up to speed?
So effective altruists were very keen on curing malaria. Like that's almost like a cartoony stereotype. And I think it's, because of Gates Foundation influences, like it was seen as much more of a slam dunk because it's like, okay, mosquito nets, you breed these like, mosquitoes that won't spread malaria, etc. So, and I feel like they were, on the one hand, it is good for narrative to be very single issue focused. So that's just the one that they happen to have picked. They might have landed on TB, but they did like try to do these like single issue, like let's save as many people as possible sort of thing.
Yeah.
I feel like everyone's moved on to being accelerationist though, because it's a
what's that?
Huh?
What is that?
Effective accelerationists.
Accelerationists. Got it. I think celebrationists.
I feel like that's
like,
just because of the whole SBF situation that kind of ruined the whole EA branding. Everyone's just kind of moved on, but essentially is the same people and vibes, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But actually, this relates to my question to you, which is, what do you think? So this book talks about how, like, when there was TB, they like romanticized it, right? To be like, well, at least you are creative, that kind of thing.
Yeah, dark, moody, like
the dark, moody, like Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah, hot artist thing.
Yeah. So what group of people or occupation do you think we overly romanticize now that would not make sense in a few years?
I mean, I think billionaires is obviously one. Billionaire isn't an occupation. It's really like a class that you start near and ascend into. But like the obvious reasons for that is because having more money than God is like clearly a thing that a lot of people would like to have without no work. In terms of like careers people romanticize, probably creator, right? Like that's like the obvious one. You don't see that the Twitch streamer that is like popping up on your feed had streamed to nobody for 2 years alone and they had to like sustain themselves with like some crappy job or their parents' money. Like I think that there's a lot of romanticism around that. I don't know. I feel like people don't romanticize work as much as they used to, or at least when I was younger. What do you think about that?
Yes, I think that shifted because for a while, I think the Silicon Valley tech bro job was also quite romanticized.
Yeah, I mean, you watch anything from the early 2010s, and building an app was like cool is like super cool to be like, yeah, I built an app or I released an app or whatever.
And
Immediately.
now you have vibe coders like me coming in.
To be clear, there's nothing wrong with making stuff.
Yeah. But like by romanticize, like I think there's a lot of like media around it, right? Yeah. So I remember like that's when the show Silicon Valley and what's the other show that people say is better, but IT Crowd or something. Yeah. It was like
I
a lot
didn't
of
like
popular
IT Crowd.
culture
It felt
around
too much like Big Bang Theory to me.
that. Oh, okay. I've never seen it. So that's good to know. So do you think that do you think it's helpful as a device to motivate yourself through self-romanticization? It sounds really wrong. You know what I'm getting at.
I mean, we're fans of ruthless introspection on this show, which is inherently uncomfortable. Like, introspection, when done well, means you're confronting things about yourself that are objectively not what you want to be doing as you move through the world. That means looking how you interact in a conversation or an argument and being like, oh, I was kind of a dirtbag, or like I said something that was rude and unhelpful to the conflict, or the way I react to being uncomfortable is being mean to the other person because I don't know how to process those emotions myself. And so romanticizing anything comes with a whole bunch of risk factors. But I'm not going to condemn the idea of being aspirational at all, right? And so, I don't know. It's a balance. It's a thing where I do really like the Zoomers be like, there's a genre of TikTok where it's like, what's your dream job? And they respond, I don't dream of labor. And I'm like, okay, I like that energy. But also, you do have to spend your life doing stuff. And so the better question is, how would you like to spend your time given the constraints of living on Earth in reality and an economy?
It's giving me the energy of that movie, Say Anything. You know, like, I don't want to buy anything. I don't want to sell anything. I don't want to process anything. Age gap. So, and then my other question for you is distribution over discovery, right? Because one segment of the book that I was really drawn to is the idea of like scientific discovery and how like Robert Koch, I guess that's how you pronounce his name. Like, you know, he made it because like it was just a prime time where there were like medical journals and people could spread ideas around. So it's like old-timey internet. And like that really helps you propel your fame as a scientist. And it's still true today. Like the best scientists are still the ones who are best creators, but in their own like field.
Like in getting published.
Exactly. Being published in a big journal is still the biggest thing, right? Because a lot of prestige is banked on you publishing in a well-known peer-reviewed journal, which then impacts your ability to get grants. And it's like a virtuous cycle you're trying to hop on. And it sucks for you, and then you're in the vicious cycle. If you're on that
and maybe
train.
that world is changing now given the shape of U.S. government.
Correct. Which again, like there might be some good that comes out of that. Like, you know, a lot of this like decentralized science movements is dependent on just changing who the stakeholders are, and how the financial incentives are working. Theoretically, the journal industry was supposed to change. Because like if everyone can just make a journal online and like, you know, get peer reviewers and all of that, like why is it that certain journals are still seen as more prestigious, right? And it has to do with like Elsevier and a lot of these like a cartel of like publishers who try to still keep control of the whole situation. And I feel like that's shifted a little bit with like preprints and like archive-like models, like a lot more like in physics, where like you would just publish and people would discuss. In
Archive.org, a
biology.
website where you can go read PDFs.
Yes,
Scientific
exactly.
PDFs.
Exactly. So that's sort of like shifted, but it did not shift as much as you would think. And I feel like there's room here for better distribution discovery of scientific research in general,
Okay.
especially from like, individuals who are like citizen scientists and N of one. I think that's where I want to reframe science towards. It's like, how can I empower you to publish your personal report of yourself and not feel like you have to be in a clinical trial or something a lot more like grandiose, right? But yeah, like I feel like it's just so apparent to me that distribution is still the core, the crux of everything, even back then.
So I think I agree and disagree. There, like, for anyone that isn't familiar, you use discovery and distribution, right? Those are your two words that you're using?
Yeah, I'm defining discovery as the act of finding out the new research thing that's happening, and then like distribution is whether people know about it.
Yeah, I mean, the gap is between figuring out something new and then getting the new thing into the hands of millions of people that maybe need it.
Correct. Or at least be famous for it.
What is the outcome we're trying to generate here? Being famous or good things happening?
I think both. Like if you're an individual and you want to be famous, then that's an outcome you're trying to go towards. Of course, like distribution of the actual product itself is important, which the book discusses like at length, right? Of like how to get the drug into developing countries. But I also think like there's a distribution of an idea, the idea that TB is caused by like bacteria, like that fundamental idea shapes the rest of science, right? And then how do you get an idea out? Because a lot of science is not even a battle of pure facts; it's a battle of story. And that battle of story affects so many things downstream. And I think this is where the nuanced argument isn't quite there, because it can be easily misunderstood as like science is made up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But in reality,
and it's not. To be clear, science is not made up.
Oh my God, dude.
Science by definition is recreatable.
Right. So for example, like in Alzheimer's disease, like the story comes down to like beta amyloid plaques being built up. Okay. But because this tau protein tangles being built up to the point where people are called like Taoists and like, I forgot what's the name for the beta amyloid Baptists or something like that.
Beta
but then that meant that there is no room for a third mechanism for the longest time. Like, and now science is like slowly catching up to find out that, these are maybe like consequences of what's going wrong and not the cause.
Mm-hmm.
But like, because these stories were so strong, like if you're applying for an NIH grant that didn't fit this story, you might not get approved, because guess who's approving the grants? Like the people who are like propelling these stories. And of course, it's like, it's not saying that, anyone's wrong or to blame here, but fundamentally, like even science itself has a story, like narrative component, and whoever is the best storyteller often wins.
I think stories generally are what matters in most situations. Mm-hmm. In the context of science, there's a good physics quote. I think it's like a Niels Bohr, maybe John von Neumann, but it's basically, physics doesn't change, just the old guard of physicists dies, and then the new guard has a different set of ideas.
Oh, I didn't know this applies to physics too. Okay.
Yeah, 100%.
Like with biology.
Like Einstein pissed off a lot of people when he started talking what he was talking. Mm-hmm. And like, that's just a story of people. Because when you grow up, especially if you spend your entire life dedicated to a thing, even if that thing is like germ theory's dumb and imaginary, and how could there possibly be these little tiny things that affect this big, strong body, like whatever you spend a ton of time thinking about, you have an emotional attachment to, because you've wrapped your ego up in it. And scientists are no different. Or maybe they're a little different because they have a process, but it fails a lot of the time, and history has shown that. Do you agree with my assessment that this book by John Green is kind of a book about angry pessimism versus naive optimism?
No. What?
So one of the big tensions in the book is people not believing something.
Okay, so I agree with the angry pessimism part, but I don't agree with the naive optimism part. I think it's pretty realist to some extent. Like, I think you and I were debating whether the tactics that are proposed are realistic, right? And whether they're too like altruistic, assuming, and whether they'll be effective. I think
So
like it's a mix. It's not like 100% ineffective. I think of course like he got the TV fighters to get the drug prices to go down. So literally he is effective in his approach.
So I think what I mean by naive optimism is most treatments for tuberculosis throughout history didn't work. But they were optimistic that it would. And so I think for people that tend to anchor on the optimistic side of, hey, things are possible, we can do things, we can change things, we often don't, because like I consider myself that in a lot of ways, we don't often grapple with the fact that when you are default optimistic or you err on the side of being optimistic, you are more likely to be wrong in general. And we're just more okay with that. Being a pessimist is being more likely to not make a decision or not be in a circumstance where you could be wrong. That's like the definition of those two default states of the mind. And I find it really interesting because obviously it maps to political climates in general today. But the disconnect between those two groups of people is that a pessimist doesn't want to believe that something could be possible because it's much easier to not be wrong because you don't have to do much to not be wrong. You just do nothing. Where an optimist is perpetually frustrated where you're not trying things because they're more comfortable with the idea that they could be wrong.
So are you saying it is good to be not like there's no like judgment behind the word naive then? Like you mean it in a literal sense?
Yeah, I mean it in a literal sense. I always mean things in a literal sense, unless I'm being cheeky.
Okay, then yes, I do agree. Because I just wasn't sure if you meant like naive implied ineffective, but you're saying like
Nope.
naive is in trying things and being okay either way.
Yeah.
Okay. Then yes, I do agree.
Chat, this is the thing that happens all the time. This is the thing. This is exactly the thing. We agree on things, we just got to get there. But it's also okay to disagree. Like having value judgments, reasonable people disagree about things that like in reasonable ways.
Exactly. And then oftentimes it comes down to what do you mean when you use that word? So like what is our rating for the book? Using our unique scale of C.
Triple C.
Oh,
Got Cameron C, got Kristen C, got Chat C. So Chat, when this video goes live, go ahead and drop a comment, see if recommend a C or no C if you like it or you don't like it, or you would recommend it, you don't recommend it. We're still figuring out what that scale actually means. So Kristen,
we like it.
I do like the book. I think the most powerful idea in the book that he goes back to a little bit, but he like mentions early on and then it threads throughout the entire book is that we experience events but live life as a process. And tuberculosis is kind of a version of that where you get sick and that's like the event, but the experience of tuberculosis is a long-term process that plays out over weeks, months, and years. And as a result, the way that we like process it is different from the things we kind of experience as events. We anchor on events that we experience like quickly because they make more sense to us. They are easier to understand because they usually have like a clear start and stop. And our brains are just better suited to deal with like an instantaneous or like a very short time frame thing versus a big longitudinal, it could happen, but there's some nuance in here and it's changing as we go and we try something and it works a little bit, but then I get sicker in a different way. And it's honestly very related to our previous book that we talked about.
I was going to say, how buildings learn. Yeah, the diachronic versus synchronic idea of things happening over time versus all at once.
Definitely check that one out.
which
And since this
is
is
a growing
such
collection of books, but
Yeah.
I realize that no one can see it.
Nope.
I'm trying to put the books that we have discussed in here.
In where?
Apparently just off camera.
Yeah, no, can't see it at all. You're right in front of it.
I know.
It needs to be
A
on a shelf.
library would happen right here.
This book does a better job of doing the thing I liked about the last book. As a result, I will give this a C. It's fun. It's heavy in parts. It kind of argues that Tim Burton's entire aesthetic is the result of tuberculosis and the aesthetic around tuberculosis, which is like a crazy thing to even comprehend. And Barbie, all of these culturally significant things can kind of trace their way back to this disease that affected the globe for hundreds of years, thousands of years. And it has this like glimmer of hope at the end of, oh no, joke, like we could figure out a way to do this if we decide it's important enough. And all of those coalesce for me to be a very firm C. So I recommend this. What about you?
Oh, very firm C for me as well. I think it's a masterclass in good writing. Like as someone who tries to practice the art of writing, I feel like this is a great study of how to make a narrative arc happen while also weaving in the different components of facts without boring everyone to death. In fact, there's actually so many more points we haven't even gotten to because of time. So there's almost like one fascinating thing you can discuss every page. So definitely,
you described this book as a collection of TikToks. Do you still agree with that?
I described the book as what a convenient way to make TikToks, because like I said, there's one fun fact almost every page, which lends itself to a really great TikTok format. One thing I've noticed at the very end is that he does mention this was originally a video that he turned into a book. So I think that also shows that there is like this whole like multimedia interplay thing. Like that's why it reads so well. It's because it was meant to be a video in the first place. So again, like very easy to read. I want like my friends who are still in the pharmaceutical and biotech industry to read it to see whether it can it's a very complex industry where everyone plays unfortunately a very small part. But if this can affect like drug pricing in some way by getting into the right hands, I would love to be a part of that.
Related to that, you said something about in our back and forth. You said that you don't like to have opinions on things that you're not the expert in, and you like to anchor on the person who is the best person to speak about a thing. Can you talk about that for a second?
Yeah, so I think we were getting down into the details of drug pricing and how it actually happens. And I was like, feeling, because I wasn't part of like those committees, right? Very interestingly, in the pharmaceutical industry, the marketing people have absolutely no connection at all with the drug pricing team. Like they are like in the ivory tower deciding what's going to happen there. So then I was like, oh no, I don't think I can speak to like how exactly prices are determined. But then it turns out you weren't even asking that question. You were asking like broadly, can you talk about how it works in the pharmaceutical industry? And then I was like, yeah, of course I can do that. I was like literally like in some of these rooms where decisions happen. So again, it was like I mistook your 10,000-foot question for like a very specific question, and that made me panic.
I liked your response to it because it made me think about what are the things individuals can do. Mm-hmm. Because clearly I'm not an expert on tuberculosis, but we have a little bit of a platform, so there's some responsibility that goes on with that comes with that. There's some responsibility that I think should come with that, but that's just my view of how the world should be. But for people that watch stuff, I was thinking about, what responsibility do we have as like viewers and fans of things on the internet? Because we're all participants in the global internet community, whether you comment or not. Like you are helping drive algorithms, whatever. And I actually really do think we all have the responsibility to make the right person famous. It's a really hard thing to define, but when you find somebody and you're like, I think that is a person with integrity, I respect how they think about things, how they solve problems, like what they advocate for, the way that you participate in the internet shapes whether or not that person gets to do more of the thing that you think is a good thing for yourself and society. And so that idea of working to make the right person famous, like sometimes I'll selfishly say by engaging with their stuff, but at the very least, being conscious about, oh, this is a person that I'd like to be saying more of the things that I think that they're saying. I think the internet would be a little bit better if we all did that.
I agree. And I think this is where like sometimes I wish the energy towards boycotts can be like transferred into energy towards support.
Yeah.
So like one practical thing is there's a lot of boycott about big corps, right? And I often feel like they need to give more specific instructions about supporting small businesses.
Yeah.
And that is often lacking. So again, I think the positive energy towards supporting causes you want to promote is more well spent than withdrawing energy from society and the woven parts of our lives.
And it's just like a basic rule of like effectiveness. You don't just bring up a problem. You need to have a solution that is at least your first suggestion about what people should do. Like, okay, if you're going to boycott buying book from Amazon, here's a link to the place where you should buy books instead. Like, it's really not hard to do that kind of stuff in general if that's how you're so inclined. Kristen, before we bounce, let's hit these questions, like a couple of these questions up.
Yeah, and then let's also mention the next book.
Yeah. All right, V's question about systemic inequalities and the choices we make. Does the narrative fit the science? I think science is doing a lot of lifting in that sentence. I think that there's very clear differences between countries that had different colonial histories, right? Like GDP is one measure of that, but infrastructure development in a country, I think John Green makes a really compelling case about infrastructure development in Sierra Leone being oriented around extracting resources from the country rather than getting the country.
That was really enlightening to me because I also had this, now I'm realizing, false narrative of what's going on there.
Yeah, so the short version is all of the railroads and transportation infrastructure of Sierra Leone and a lot of other like formerly colonized countries, they were oriented around getting resources that were in the country out of the country. Where other areas of the world, they oriented their public transportation around making it easier to move within that space and making the country itself like a stronger entity. And if everything is oriented around resources leaving the country and then the people that are extracting it leave, well, guess what? The only thing that country is set up to be successful at is by further depleting its resources and moving them out of the country, as opposed to any of the other things like U.S. leading innovation and drug development. Like they can't just start doing that because there's hundreds of years of history that make that uniquely possible in places like the U.S. for now. So I think that systemic inequality is one piece of a larger picture. Ongoing. Go ahead.
But like John Green does have an example of success to show that if you solve for inequality, it turns into a virtuous cycle. I want to say it's Paraguay, but I'm not completely remembering which country it was, but it was with Partners in Health where they were able to get the drug delivered and monitor the patients, etc. And that helped a lot of people. So it's I like the fact that there was already an actual positive case study to show that it's not just naive optimism. Like we've done it before, we can do it again.
Yeah. We're very much in a spot where kind of on the discovery versus distribution side, I would tweak distribution to be implementation. We know how to do a lot of things. There's just giddy up and pain and resourcing and financial constraints in making some things happen. And that's why, in terms of building startups and stuff, the execution and distribution of a good product is often the thing that makes people fail as opposed to actually making something good. Sometimes the good thing is clearly existing and it just doesn't get to where it needs to go. Related to that question, Cool Beans has this hyper focus on these individual pieces. I do think people that are uncomfortable with hearing language that they immediately associate with something that they've decided isn't worthwhile, you're not going to convince that person because you're not speaking to them in a language that they can understand. I think that's partially why Kristen and I anchor on this, hey, do this thing because it ultimately works out for you energy. We speak like that because we know that is meeting people that don't care about inequality where they are. And we also believe it's true. You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think of it as sales 101. Like
Yeah.
have the so what to the person you're speaking to needs to be super clear. And sometimes we don't know. I think like that's the art of it, right? It's like empathy is easy to say and hard to do. And sometimes a lot of people have hidden motives and that are really tricky to uncover. So that's why I feel like supporting people who have figured out all these like pieces is really important because it's just so much work.
Yeah. The downside though is waiting on hyper specialization to solve problems means that everything happens on a longer time scale than maybe you want, or public momentum facilitates the ability to actually make something change.
Yep.
I like this question. It has nothing to do with the book. What country has your favorite sidewalks? I have an answer to this. Kristen, do you?
You go ahead first. I'm still processing the question. What?
Poland. Poland has my favorite sidewalks, but not specifically Poland. It former Eastern Bloc countries, like former like communist countries, they had these giant promenade like streets and sidewalks. I think that there's some like underlying military or parade reason for that. Like in the US, the interstate highway system is designed so that planes can land on them in the event of an emergency, like back then in a military emergency.
Wow.
Polish sidewalks are so big and wide. And like, obviously old medieval cities aren't like that, but in Warsaw and parts of, what was it? Krakow, like the cities were just big and wide. I just, for some reason, really liked that. I don't know, just in some ways, supervillain energy. I just liked the big sidewalks. So I'll say Poland.
Oh, wow. I usually would say Japan to almost every one of these questions,
Sure.
but what I had learned is that Japan does not have consistent sidewalks, especially as you get to rural areas. So I
Okay.
remember walking on the street there.
Sounds like the
Gosh.
US.
I feel like I'm gonna like not answer this question because I'm still trying to find my favorite sidewalk.
We'll call back to it next episode.
Yeah. All right. So our book for next week is
The Death of Ivan Ilyich. It is a short story.
Tolstoy for the next.
Yeah, sad boy Tolstoy. Sad boy Tolstoy. Say that 5 times fast. Sad boy Tolstoy. Sad boy Tolstoy. All right.
That's going into a clip. Yes. So why did we pick this book?
Because I'm sad. No. It is a short story, and I didn't want to read another book, full book this week. There's a lot.
Yes, that was quite a lot. Love the book, but
it like we just did a book about tuberculosis and reflecting on this like longitudinal nature of this disease. This is on topic of the theme of reflecting on death, and it's about deciding how you want to live a good life. Unfortunately for Ivan, he is reflecting at the end of his life. Perhaps we can reflect a little bit earlier than that and make some decisions that make our lives better as a result.
yeah. And what creeped me out was you mentioned the book, and then I saw it later referenced in an episode of Severance I was watching, and I was like, was that a coincidence? And then you told me, oh, that's
Like, no, I had been meaning to read it, and then they mentioned it in the episode, and I was like, okay, cool. Let's just listen to whatever the universe is telling me right now.
Okay. All right. So you please do get a copy from bookshop.org or Libro if you want to get a copy.
Or Amazon. I won't begrudge you that.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
You do what you